Hello, Tungsten Miner here. Today I am continuing the Mod Spotlight series on advanced rocketry. And today we're going to talk about building your first space station. So let's jump right in. Okay, what we're looking at here is basically just a launch pad. We've got the same launch pad blocks that we've talked about in previous series for building rockets. We've got the same gantry, which has the same kind of configuration where it needs to be the bottom of it at the same level as the bottom of the pad. So this is 1 meter deep into the stone here. And then I've also got a new component this time, which is this space station assembler. And it's made up of some titanium gears and advanced circuits and dilithium dust, so it's pretty expensive to put together. And in fact, if you're playing the Ad Astra mod pack, which I put together for specifically this mod, you'll find that dilithium dust is only available on the moon. So you have to have finished a lunar mission first if you're playing that particular mod pack. In any case, what this is going to do is take any blocks that fit within the three-dimensional space defined by the landing pad and the gantry, just like it does for a rocket. But instead of making it into a vehicle you can hop on and fly around, it's going to package it up inside of this satellite bay and assign it the ID belonging to this chip. So you'll wind up getting a chip out of this, which has a space station ID programmed into it. Of course, like a satellite chip, you lose this thing and it's gone forever and you can't get it back again. So very good idea to make a duplicate of it in the satellite assembly machine as quickly as possible as you've made this and put it in a safe place. Of course, I don't have anything here, so it'd be a very uninteresting space station if I were to hit build right now. Instead of doing that though, I'm going to take a moment and start laying the groundwork for a space station, and I will be right back. Okay, I've been at work and I've got maybe the basis for a space station going here. Now, I deliberately chose a very simple design and a lot of glass so we can actually see what's going on inside of this. I have no doubt that both you and I could make one that looks prettier, but I'm trying to make it easy to tell what's going on, so not so pretty. First of all, I'll point out that I've got some leadstone flux ducts from thermal expansion underneath here. And the notion is that we're going to need to power this base somehow. And running conduits in and out of the walls of your space station is a good way to punch holes in it, which of course lets all the air out. So I like to put my main run of conduits underneath the base, and then I use these energy cells, which are a solid block, to make the transition in and out of the pressure vessel. And as you can see, I've got glass here, and then inside of that you can see I've got this blue cyan glass, and that actually forms a floor. And glass works perfectly well as a block. It's a solid block. That's what's important. It can't be anything that's a partial block like a stair or a slab. It has to be filling in the whole 1 meter, which is why a flux duct does not count and an energy cell does count. So that forms the transition between the inside and the outside. And then I've got cyan and regular glass and a little bit of this polished diorite as the base layer here. The next layer up, I have polished diorite all around, but it doesn't matter what's on the inside of this because I've already got a solid layer completely below. And then at the top, I've got a solid layer of glass and diorite, so that makes the top surface. And then on this wall, I've got glass and diorite again, and again on this side. And finally, on this end and on the opposite end, everything is polished diorite and glass except this door. This is actually the airlock door. And it's a special door that you can make only from the Advanced Rocketry mod, from a bunch of steel plates. And the Advanced Rocketry mod recognizes it as solid, even though it's not really solid. So it's a special kind of door you have to use so that you can get in and out of your space station without causing a leak. Using a vanilla door, it recognizes that it's not a solid block, and therefore things just stream right out. It also behaves like an iron door, hence the button. Whoopsie, let's get a pin here. A little tricky doing it this way, and you can think of other ways to do it. Okay, so now we're inside the pressure vessel. Every surface that I can see is either a solid block, as in the case of all these walls, or has a solid block underneath it. So you can see I'm pointing at that cyan block down underneath that glass block, or this energy cell block. All of the rest of these are structural ducts from thermal expansion, which allows me to put these nice covers on top of them, and I chose a clear one so you can see what's going on. But the notion is that now I'm able to route power. So it came in the pressure vessel, right? The floor is all these cyan blocks plus this one energy block in the middle. That forms a solid seal, which allows me to route power from the outside to the inside. And now I have this floor, which is raised up 1 meter on mostly structural ducts, but I've got these leadstone power ducts that bring me to the oxygen machine. So this oxygen vent works in 2 ways. We've already kind of covered this in the lunar mission, but we'll talk about it again because it's important here too. First of all, you can fill this thing with oxygen in this tank here, and it will just spew out the oxygen and fill up the space, and there you go. However, you got to keep replenishing the oxygen, and it does get used up. So unless you've got a good supply of oxygen in your space station, which you probably won't, it's better to use these CO2 scrubbers. And these are reasonably cheap machines if they are placed inside the pressure vessel completely, just as the oxygen machine has to be. And there's a glass block right behind that, so this is all sealed in. And they're both right next to this oxygen machine on one on either side. Then you can place this carbon collection cartridge in here, and this thing will take damage over time as it scrubs the CO2 out of the air. Eventually they get used up, you just got to replace them. And they're not terribly expensive either. So keep a couple extra on hand, and then you can even run them through your chemical reactor to take a completely depleted one, spend a little bit of power, and you get back a ready-to-use one plus a block of charcoal. A item of charcoal back again. And that way you can keep reusing the same one. So what I wind up doing is I make 4, and I keep a pair in the machines at all times, and I have a pair ready. And when one gets filled up, then I just replace them. Now, a word of warning, that means this whole system gets depressurized, basically. There's no air, you can't breathe once those things get used up. And you can't run them through the chemical reactor until they get used up. So it's best to keep a spacesuit on when you know that these are close to getting depleted. And then you'll just notice, oh, they're depleted, I can swap them out now. And then you won't be using the oxygen from your spacesuit. So if you notice your spacesuit is getting depleted of oxygen while you think you're in your space station, probably it's because your CO2 filters have run out. Now, this machine, like many of the other advanced rocketry machines, does have a redstone control. I've got this one set to redstone control normal, which means since the switch is flipped up, this isn't running right now. If I turn this on and give it a moment, these start filtering the air. So we can see we're now using up some power. I've got a good supply, so you won't see that going down. If I had oxygen, you'd see this getting used up, but I'm not relying on oxygen. Instead, you can see these have started to take damage. Now, they take about 24 hours of real-time usage, so you get a good long while out of both of them. Don't need the power right now. Okay, what else is going on in here? Well, basically not a lot at this point. It's just a space that I'm filling up with oxygen so that when I launch it out into the sky, I'm able to survive in here. So I'm going to cover this up just so I don't trip over it. And then over here, I've got these 3 other machines. This one is the gravity controller, and I can range from gravity being roughly Earth normal in the middle here to being roughly twice Earth normal, or almost but not quite 0. You can change the configs to allow an absolutely 0 gravity, but if you kick off the floor and don't quite make it to the ceiling, you can actually get stuck. So that's turned off by default. If you happen to have the rocket pack on you, you can get yourself unstuck pretty easily. So you can fiddle with that config if you want to. This guy is the angular velocity controller, the orientation controller, which determines the spin. Once you're up in space, of course, up is, well, relative, so it doesn't really matter what your orientation is towards the planet. It's really just a decorative effect, but it's actually kind of fun to slowly spin things around. I will warn you, though, it is a little bit nauseating if you're prone to seasickness, so you might want to cool it with the angular velocity. Finally, we've got the altitude controller. This allows you to say how far away from the planet does your ship appear to be. As far as I can tell, I don't think this controls anything, although I'm not positive it doesn't cost you a little bit more rocket fuel to fly up to your base when you're at a higher altitude. I'm not positive. In any case, though, you get the idea. This controls how far away you seem to be from the planet for sure. Okay, you don't actually need these machines. You do get reasonable default settings without them, but they're nice to have to be able to control that yourself. And as you can see, there's no conduit underneath them, so they do not require power. They just allow you to mess with things once you're up here. The other thing I'll mention is that while I am using airlock doors, I don't actually have a real airlock yet. Because if I open this door, that's open to space once we've launched this thing, and there's no containing the atmosphere. So while that door is open, this gets completely depressurized. If you're counting on oxygen, that means you've just blown out whatever oxygen was in this atmosphere, and you're going to replenish it from this tank. So it gets kind of wasteful if you keep doing that, hence the need for an airlock. On the other hand, if you're using these CO2 scrubbers, it kind of doesn't matter. And you can just start with having no airlock and just opening and closing these airlock doors, and then build yourself an airlock later on. Okay, so let's start looking at how we get this thing into orbit, because I think I've got enough to get started with here. The one thing we don't have is power, but we can deal with that a little bit later because I've set myself up to have these conduits on the outside so far. So I can set up whatever power I want on the outside and be able to route it whichever way I like. Okay, so let's talk about packaging this thing. First, I'm going to hit scan. And just like when we're building a rocket, it's going to scan through the structure and it's looking to see, does it fit? Does it have what it's supposed to have? Does everything look pretty reasonable? The standards here are really low, of course, because this isn't a rocket. You don't need engines. You don't need fuel tanks. You don't need a guidance computer. None of that stuff is really relevant. And in fact, there's nothing in particular that you must have for the station itself. So the scan step is a little bit superfluous. Scanning almost complete. And this will tell us, hey, this looks good. So we're going to hit build. And you notice it's consumed both the satellite bay and the satellite chip. Space station chip, rather. So let this thing go down, scan, scan, scan. And it's using power the whole time, so you have to keep it powered as you go along. What I wind up doing in my Let's Play worlds is just taking this thing and putting it right next to the rocket builder, because, yeah, whatever. It's all part of the same pad. I don't actually build multiple separate pads. This is just for making the lesson a little bit more clear here. A little bit of an oversight. What do we see left? Well, I built my space station module all the way to the very, very edge, and then I stuck buttons on. Except, of course, I stuck the buttons on outside of where the space station was. So these buttons are now missing from the space station that is in the box. So I'm going to grab myself a button to bring that along so I can put it back on again and be able to get in later on. Okay, so now what we see is I've got a space station container, and that has all the blocks that vanished out of the world, and that's pretty much everything in my space station. And I've now got this station chip. This is the one and only way to tell a rocket where to go to deliver this thing. So, good idea to make myself a copy of this as quickly as possible. So, station chip. And let's head back over to my satellite builder. So I'm going to take my unprogrammed chip, pop it over here, take the programmed chip, put it in the middle, and then write to secondary chip. Writing, writing, writing. And now I've got 1 and 2 chips that have this station ID on them. Ordinarily, you'd want to take one of these guys and tuck it away someplace very, very safe. Because, like I say, you can't tell your rocket to go up to your station if you don't have anything there. Let's see. Now we want to launch this thing. So I'm going to reuse this rocket. And I look in my satellite bay. It's not a satellite, but hey, you still use the satellite bay. And I'm going to drop my space station container right into this satellite bay. And then I'm going to click on my guidance computer, take out the planet chip, put in one of my station chips, and now we should be good to go. Now, I can just send this thing off by itself. I don't have to go with it, but I can go with it. And actually, I'm going to choose to do that. So I'm going to give myself a seat. And I'm going to drop that on there. Oh, right. So what am I doing wrong? What I'm doing wrong is that I've got a rocket that's already assembled. So I need to disassemble the rocket first. And then I can shift click, put my seat on, and then build my rocket again. So you notice how much faster this goes? It takes a certain unit time for every square meter that it has to scan. And this pad is 5 by 5, really quite tiny compared to our huge pad over there. So that one goes a whole lot faster. Okay, ready to take off. Destination Station 1. Station's inside. I've got fuel in the rocket. I've got a guidance computer. I've got all my cargo. I don't have a space station, but I'm playing in creative mode at the moment, so that's not a problem. If I were not in creative mode, if I were in survival mode, for example, I would get killed doing this. So as soon as I pop off this rocket, I would suffocate. So make sure you have a fully functional spacesuit before you take the trip. Moreover, you're probably going to want one with a jetpack on it, because when you land, as you'll see, we're going to land right on top of the module we're sending up, which means, of course, to get in those doors, we're going to have to jump off the top, drop down inside, and hopefully land in that tiny little vestibule I left myself. Of course, you can set yourself up with a bigger little porch outside, so you can jump onto that. But honestly, if you're floating around in space, it's really, really nice to have that jetpack to be able to control the process a bit. Okay, so gaining some altitude. Eventually, just like with a lunar mission, what's going to wind up happening is we'll get to our maximum altitude, and then we're going to change dimensions to dimension -2, I think is the default. So here we are changing dimensions, and things get a little wonky sometimes. Sometimes it works great first time out, sometimes not so much. So for example, this time around, the planet has just vanished. We're not actually lost in space. Earth is still below us someplace. We'll find it again soon. This countdown of auto-descending, I usually let go all the way through, especially the first time I've been to a certain dimension, because the game needs a little time to generate all the chunks and get everything in order. And I find it prevents problems to give it that time the first time through. So we're descending here and can't really see, but there it is. Our space station has been placed in the world, way out here in the middle of nowhere, and we are now descending towards the roof of it, being right the center of it. Okay, we've come down for landing. I'm still sitting on the rocket, so even if I were in survival mode, I'd be fine until I jump off. If I were in survival mode and I did jump off, I'd die without a spacesuit. You'll notice it's saying press space to take off destination Earth. So since it's still got the space station chip in the guidance computer, it's just going to bring us back to where we launched from. It doesn't know where else to go. So here I jump off, and down we go. And our space station is now in orbit. We can't see the Earth anyplace. We can see the sun, but that's mostly actually just a glitch, not so much deliberate intention on the mod. You can see I can fly underneath and take a look around. And there's kind of nothing else going on around here. Now, here's where that button comes in handy. So let's fly back up here and stick one on. I'm going to jump here, press the button, come inside. Okay, so now let me switch this on. Give it just a moment. Here we go. So now, game mode survival, nothing happens. We're all good. But if I open this door, no oxygen detected, and I start taking damage. Door closes, everything's good again, start scrubbing the atmosphere, we're totally fine. Now, we're using up power, and we're not generating any power. So whatever I happen to leave in that battery is all I've got. And this thing uses about 21 RF per tick. So it's not a small amount of power. I mean, it gets through a fair bit. So I'm going to change back over to creative. And I'm going to give myself a solar generator. Now you notice there's a solar panel and a solar generator. The solar panel is actually just a part for building one of the other multi-block machines. And in fact, it is part of the recipe for building this solar generator. But by itself, the solar panel does absolutely nothing for you. It does not generate any power at all. So what you want to build yourself is this solar generator if you're going to make any kind of power. The other thing I want to take with me is a bit of flux duct to collect that power, because these are not a multi-block. They're a single block item that just works by itself. And just because you have a bunch of them touching each other doesn't mean it's going to transmit any power anyplace. So I'm going to build this out a bit, and I'm going to give myself 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. So now I've got 7 of those total, which gives me 7 RF per tick of power generation out here in space. Now you remember, I just told you, 21 RF per tick, so I kind of need a bunch more of these things. So I have, in my Let's Play worlds, generally built myself at least one array of 7 of these guys. So that's, or 21 of them, I should say. 7 times 3, 21. 1, 2, 3. And of course, I'm flying around here in creative mode, but your jetpack works pretty much the same. It's a little bit more cumbersome. Okay, so here we are. I've now got a solar array. The solar generators are dropping their power into these flux ducts. The flux ducts all connect up, and they wind up going into this energy cell. And we can see no change, because I got 21 of them, right? And 21 RF per tick in order to power that oxygen machine. So I can now run the oxygen machine without losing any power. Of course, that does me no good at all if I want to run any other machines. So I'm going to set myself up with another array over on this side so that I've got enough power to actually run a little bit of a surplus. And just for symmetry's sake, I usually make another batch. And I don't know if you've messed around with these things before, but we can look at the recipe for these guys. You need 3 gold plates, which is 3 gold ingots, which means I'm using a lot of gold here. So before you get started on this, you're going to have a pretty decent gold mine going. All right. And there's no particular reason you have to build them in the shape that I'm building them in. I think it just looks kind of cool. It's similar to what you'd see on the International Space Station or some other real-life space station here. Okay, so now we've got a box with an atmosphere. We've got some power generation that's all coming inside the box. We have kind of a landing pad, not exactly the one we might like in the future, but it's not nothing. And we can get in and out of our space station, and we've got a clean atmosphere in here. So this is the basic stuff that you need in order to have any kind of space station at all. So let's play around with these just a little bit and we can get a sense of that. So right now target gravity is 11 and artificial gravity is right around that rate. So if I'm no longer flying, which I'm not, and I jump, you can see I bang my head on the ceiling really fast and then sink really slowly. If I go outside, I'll fly up to the roof here. So now I'm not flying, this is just a jump. And I can jump a little over 4 meters with this level of gravity. Okay, back in here. But I can also take the gravity and crank it all the way up. And you can see it doesn't change instantaneously. So the artificial gravity is now climbing at a certain rate to get up to the maximum. And having the gravity at this rate means I probably won't even be able to jump on top of these boxes once it gets to the top level. I'm not quite there yet. But if you want Earth-like gravity, you want it kind of in this green band over here. Angular velocity, I can take this and just crank that over there. And you can see now we're twisting ourselves around. But one of the ways we can fix this particular bug is to come to this altitude thing. And let's change that. And anytime the planet disappears, changing the altitude seems to bring it back right away. So now we can see that we're pitching pretty heavily relative to the Earth. And what's going on here, the reason the light has changed, is that we've now got the sun kind of aft of us and now getting to be below. And so it assumes that we're in total darkness here. Now I can put up a torch, for example, but there's a problem with using regular torches in a space station. So let's, for example, just throw a few up here. What happens when I open the door? No oxygen. Torches go out. That's one of the special fancy features that you get with advanced rocketry. Fortunately, advanced rocketry does provide a solution for this, which is their special thermite torch, which you might remember from the moon episode. So you make thermite by grinding up some aluminum and some iron, putting it together, coating it on a stick, and you get some thermite torches. So if you want to, you can put thermite torches in your base, and they provide you plenty of light. And even when you open the atmosphere, they don't go out. So that's the recommended solution for lighting on the inside. Now, there's also a bunch of other options. For example, this station light, glowstone and some iron sheet comes directly from advanced rocketry, but there's a jillion mods that add different kinds of light. You know, glowstone itself would work totally fine. It's just the torches that go out when you expose them to an oxygen-less atmosphere, because they cannot combust. So here we are, basic space station. The way that we get home again is just jump on the rocket and go back. We can come back to the space station anytime by dropping the station ship into the rocket and just flying right back up here again. If you've got mods that have teleportation, so RF tools, for example, is included in the Add Astra mod pack, then you could set up a matter receiver here and have a transmitter on the planet and beam yourself up to your space station. Next time, I will get into talking about how do you extend from having your basic space station to having something a little bit more elaborate that can actually serve as a functional base up in orbit. So, until then, talk to you later.